What's their love language? You know, we talk about the 5 love languages when we talk about relationships and marriage, but especially when you're talking about preteens and teenagers, it's important to know what your child's love language is. When you know that, then you kind of know what motivates them.
Hello, welcome to Parent Partners, a ministry of CVCA. My name is Jeff Bogue. I'm the senior pastor of Grace Church of Greater Akron. This is Tandy Hicks, and she is the director of Oasis at CVCA. And this is Brad Deetscreek. He's the pastor of family ministries at Grace Church of Greater Akron. So thanks for being a part of Parent Partners. Thanks for watching this episode. And this episode, we're digging into academics a little bit, right? So 1 Corinthians 10:31, Paul says, so whatever you do, whatever you eat or drink, whatever you do it all for the glory of God. And school is a part of that, right? And especially when you're a student, that's kind of your job. That's a big part of your life investment and what God is calling you to. And so we're asking this question, my kid isn't motivated academically or school or just about school in general. What do I do about that? Do I discipline them all the time? Do I yell and scream? I can tell you that doesn't work well. What do we do about that, Tandy? Because we want, it's important. It's actually a spiritual discipline. I'm doing something that God has made me responsible for right now. But we want to keep it all in its right perspective. What's your counsel on that? How do I motivate them?
Well, I'll say that I have 4 kids of my own, all of whom go to CVCA. One just graduated, so I guess I have 3 left. And that's a question that I'm always asking myself as well, to be honest. But the truth of the matter is that I think it starts with understanding each individual child. And if you can understand your children, what motivates them, what gets them excited, then you can begin to help them find the intrinsic motivation that they need to be successful academically. And I can tell you, in my own home, we have 4 children, like I said, and they all run the gamut as far as ability and motivation. But I think it starts with really what's their love language. You know, we talk about the 5 love languages when we talk about relationships and marriage. But especially when you're talking about preteens and teenagers, it's important to know what your child's love language is. When you know that, then you kind of know what motivates them. So for some students, it's words of affirmation, telling them how great they are. For other students, it's figuring out how to get them to that special gift, that prize that they want to achieve. And then it's also about just setting goals and getting them to understand, in order to get to the next goal, I have to achieve this first goal. And that's the hard part, I think, for a lot of us as parents. When you have a lot of kids, you're trying to figure out which one, is motivated how. The other thing to keep in mind is that motivation changes as they get older and as they get older. So what was their love language at age 5 could be different at age 17. Yeah.
So knowing them, right? And school isn't one size fits all. I know we all go to the same building, but we learn differently, we think differently. Sometimes that forgotten homework is tied more to the kid's personality than a rebellious spirit, right? And so thinking that stuff through. I loved what you said, that sometimes it's just reminding them it's a means to an end. I'm not necessarily asking you to love it all.
Right.
I'm asking you to think about your future and get where you need to go. Brad, there's a line, right? So there's a line of, I want to know you, I want to help you. Like at CVCA, there's Oasis, there's these kind of things. There's kind of all the resources in the world that would help a student academically. But then there's a line of, this is your responsibility and you need to embrace it. How do we sense that line, and what do we kind of do with that?
I think that's a hard one, right? Because it's knowing your kids. But I think when we start with when they're young, they're totally self-governed, where we're giving them all the direction and moving them to the point where they can make all their own decisions is a tough one. And so it's getting them motivated with the why, the intrinsic motivation. If you can give them vision to see, it's like why this is important. But eventually it comes down to, if I believe in the Bible, as you read, helping them to do the best in all things, it's pushing them, and it's giving them some discipline and helping them, and then realizing at times that means I have to maybe bring in some guidelines for them, put some guardrails in their life to help them. And so it's knowing with each child, knowing their ability, it might be different for each one, but if it's not just, if you consistently just continually not turning in your homework, I remember times maybe wouldn't turn their homework in, but they knew how to do everything else. Everything else was always on time. They always knew somehow when the new game was coming out or something like that. So I know they have the ability to stay on task, but trying to help them with the why. So sometimes it would be, that's where discipline would be, either removing them from situations or disciplining them, whatever would be, punishing them or whatever you would say it, in order to get them to exceed. This does matter. I mean, it's going to be okay no matter what. Whether they're great students or not, they still can be who God calls them to be. Right. But if we can just help them. So there's sometimes where, I've probably erred sometimes on being too hard on them and realizing that didn't get me the right thing I wanted anyway. But the times realizing it's like, no, it's still going to cost you. You still have to do these things. But maybe if I can help them to see why.
I also think it's important that they learn to fail sometimes too. And I think that's hard, right? As a parent, you don't want your kid to fail, but that's also a reward in itself, is sometimes they have to face the consequences of their inaction in order for them to learn how to be a little more motivated, a little more, figure out what they did wrong in order to make a better choice.
But what's hard for me as a parent, I feel that I make it about me.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm failing, and what's it look like to other people, and so I make it more my issue, right? It's like I'm thinking about myself instead. I'm really maybe not as motivated for them to do well for their own future, and ends up being like, I want them to do well because I want to look good. I don't want to be embarrassed in front of the teachers.
I will tell you, the first thing I say to parents is, this is not a reflection on you.
Well, that's hard one to believe, though. Sometimes.
Right, it is, but it really is about the student taking responsibility. And you have kids. The first thing you want them to learn, the same thing that God wants us to learn, is how to take responsibility for our own lives in the end. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to raise them to be self-advocating, self-actualizing adults.
Yeah, I think looking at your kid and saying, listen, this is not the end of the world. You don't have to be Einstein, right? I'm not asking you to be a genius. If they have it, it's interesting. I look at academics, and I look at it a lot the same way I think of athletics. If you have the ability, I want you to do it. If in sports, right? Like if you have the ability, I want you to go for it. I want you to leave like 110% on the field, which is actually impossible to do, but we talk that way. It's the same thing academically. I want you to leave it on the field, no regrets. And if that's a C, I don't care. I care that you work hard and charge hard at it.
And that comes with knowing your kid. Because you have to know where they are ability-wise.
Exactly.
Right. Yep. So we think about these things as parents. We worry about it. We worry about their future. But I think keeping it all in perspective is a big deal. I was not a motivated student. And because of illness in my home, I did not have really engaged parents, right? Not because they were wonderful, but it was illness situation. And my fancy name is Dr. Bogue, right? Like you can do this and not make honor roll. I don't know if I've ever made the honor roll until way later on in my academic
career. I didn't either, don't worry.
Wait a minute.
I didn't. I was a terrible student.
And we all have kids in college now, and you kind of see it on the, as a parent, you see it on the other side. And when they start getting into what they love, what they're really interested in, it's amazing how their motivation changes, So if they don't like algebra, who does, And so, but all of a sudden they shift into things they're passionate about, how God wired them. We just want them to get the basic skills. I don't want them to sacrifice their future for a momentary input, right? It's a big question, and it's a tough one, and we know it's a conversation in a lot of our homes, right? The tension over schoolwork can be a big deal. The pressure kids feel, the pressure parents feel. Almost dreading going into that tension sometimes is frustrating, but we want to help. So we're praying for you. There's professionals like Tandy and others at CVCA who are there to surround you, and as a school, we have those resources. If you're not tied into Oasis and things like that, know about that stuff. And then long-term view with everything. We're managing the children that God has given us and trying to do that in a loving and a helpful way. And we want to help and pray for you as you do that too, all right? So this is Parent Partners, CVCA. Let us know if we can serve you in any way.